Meaning record company guys sit around and tell the artists, this is hot, say that, do this. We're gonna have this guy write the lyrics.
Are you surprised by the evidence that's already coming out in the criminal trial?
No, I'm not surprised. I experienced some of those things. Witnessed violence.
The courtroom was a pressure cooker, ready to burst under the weight of new revelations. What was expected to be another routine day in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs turned into an explosive spectacle no one could have anticipated. Ice Cube, the rap legend turned cultural icon, had arrived unannounced, carrying not just a folder of documents, but decades of secrets that threatened to upend the very foundations of the entertainment industry. His testimony wasn't just a statement. It was an indictment of a system built on manipulation, coercion, and exploitation, implicating some of the industry's most revered figures in a clandestine network of control.
Dishonest, violent, horrible. A promiscuous swinger who lied to and cheated on multiple partners. Incredibly, that's how Sean Diddy Combs' own lawyers described the billionaire music mogul, currently facing serious sex trafficking charges in a New York court.
The atmosphere shifted the moment he stepped through the doors. Ice Cube was not a man cowed by the weight of the system. He walked with purpose, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. This was not just about Diddy anymore. This was about the shadowy machinery behind Hollywood's glitzy exterior. His voice carried the weight of decades, the stories of artists whose careers had been quietly dismantled, and the names that Hollywood had whispered but never dared to say aloud. Jamie Foxx, Oprah Winfrey, Quincy Jones. These weren't just names. They were pillars of an empire long thought untouchable, now allegedly entangled in a web of dark practices that Cube was determined to expose. The testimony began with what Ice Cube referred to as the club, a hidden circle of gatekeepers and enforcers who decide who rises and who falls in the entertainment world. According to Cube, this wasn't about mere favoritism or industry politics. It was a calculated system of control. He described how artists were brought into the fold with promises of fame and fortune, only to be ensnared in a labyrinth of blackmail and coercion. Cube laid out how secret recordings taken at exclusive parties and private events were used as leverage to silence dissenters. These weren't just rumors, they were tactics, and Cube alleged that Diddy was not just a participant in the system, but one of its architects.
And somewhat, some social engineering going on here to make sure those prisons stay full. Now,
the courtroom was riveted as Cube detailed how this network operated. He described the infamous gatherings, lavish events at sprawling mansions, concealed behind gates and layers of security. Phones were confiscated at the door, and what happened inside was never meant to leave the premises. Cube painted a chilling picture of these events. Dimly lit rooms, the faint murmur of conversations, and an unsettling sense that every move was being watched, recorded, cataloged. He claimed that these parties were not about celebration, but about compliance. They were tests, designed to see who could be trusted, who could be controlled, and who might need to be silenced. The most damning revelations, however, came when Q began to connect the dots. He claimed that Diddy's empire was built not just on music, but on the systematic exploitation of others. He alleged that Diddy maintained an archive, an extensive collection of recordings, photos, and other materials that served as a tool of blackmail. These materials, Cube said, weren't just used to ruin careers, but to control them. He described how artists who stepped out of line would suddenly find themselves the target of smear campaigns, their reputations destroyed overnight by conveniently leaked scandals or unsubstantiated rumors. Cube alleged that this was no accident, but a coordinated effort to maintain the status quo.
They were referred to me as Wild King Nights. And what a Wild King Night was when him and a guest would go to a hotel room or be at his home, his bedroom, and they would have intimate gatherings. I would have to go and prep that hotel room, which consisted of baby oil Astroglide.
As Cube's testimony unfolded, the allegations grew darker. He spoke of Jamie Foxx, a man whose career was seemingly untouchable, and how he had been targeted by this system. Cube claimed that Foxx had confided in him about the pressures he faced, the strange invitations he received, and the feeling that he was being groomed for something he didn't fully understand. Cube also implicated Oprah Winfrey and Quincy Jones, suggesting that they played roles in perpetuating the system. He described how Foxx had been brought to Jones' home under the guise of mentorship, only to be subjected to an experience that left him shaken and uncertain about his future. The courtroom was silent as Cube recounted these stories, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone present. He described how Foxx's career was quietly derailed after he began to distance himself from these circles. Roles disappeared, projects fell through, and the media began to portray Foxx as unstable and unreliable. Cube suggested that this was no coincidence but a calculated effort to punish Foxx for refusing to play along. He even hinted that Foxx's recent health scare, widely reported as a medical emergency, might have been something far more sinister, a warning to others who might consider breaking free from the system.
I thought he was this clean businessman who rise to the top because he was such a powerful and smart, educated man. I had no idea that he had this other side to him. And when I started to get exposed to his lifestyle, I started to really realize, like, this guy has an addiction. It's not just once every few weeks, it's every day, every hour.
Cube didn't stop there. He tied these allegations to broader patterns within the industry, describing how artists who spoke out or refused to comply often faced similar fates. He alleged that entire careers had been destroyed by the same tactics, with artists labeled as difficult or unstable, effectively blacklisted without explanation. He pointed to examples of musicians and actors who had seemingly vanished from the spotlight, their names tarnished by the very industry that had once celebrated them. Q painted a picture of an entertainment world where power was maintained not through talent or merit, but through fear and obedience. The courtroom was spellbound, the weight of Cube's revelations hanging heavy in the air. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a reckoning. The allegations weren't just about Diddy. They were about an entire system that had thrived in the shadows, exploiting the very people it claimed to celebrate. Cube's testimony was more than just a statement. It was a call to action, a demand for accountability in an industry that had long been immune to scrutiny. As he left the courtroom, Cube's words lingered, a reminder that the truth once revealed cannot be silenced. This was no longer just a trial. It was a moment of reckoning for Hollywood itself.
People at the top can manipulate what's going on with the people who are bickering and fighting.
The weight of Ice Cube's testimony had left the courtroom in stunned silence, but the implications of his revelations were only beginning to take shape. What he unveiled wasn't just a series of individual abuses. It was a system, vast and interconnected, where influence operated like an underground current. And as the trial continued, the pieces of this sinister puzzle began falling into place, revealing a network that extended far beyond Sean Diddy Combs. The world was now questioning how deep this rabbit hole went and how many lives had been caught in its web. What Ice Cube exposed about Jamie Foxx's ordeal was just the tip of the iceberg. His allegations about the so-called gatekeepers cast a shadow over the industry's most celebrated figures. Quincy Jones, Oprah Winfrey, Diddy. These weren't just names. These were powerhouses whose influence shaped entire generations of culture. But Cube's testimony forced us to confront a chilling question. How much of that influence was wielded in the shadows, and at what cost? The courtroom buzzed with whispered speculation, and for good reason. If even a fraction of Cube's claims held true, the industry wasn't just complicit. It was complicit by design.
That I'm not part of the club.
As the trial delved deeper, more unsettling details emerged. Prosecutors brought forward corroborating evidence that hinted at a pattern of behavior meticulously hidden for decades. Rumors of secret recordings and blackmail material were no longer just industry gossip. They were supported by testimony from insiders, former employees, and even artists who had distanced themselves from the spotlight. One former associate of Diddy, speaking under the condition of anonymity, described private gatherings where hidden cameras were allegedly positioned in strategic locations, capturing moments that could later be weaponized. These recordings, the source claimed, were not just trophies, but tools wielded to ensure silence and obedience. For years, whispers about these gatherings had circulated among those in the know. Cube's descriptions of the networking nights aligned eerily with accounts from others who had attended similar events. These weren't glamorous Hollywood parties. They were power plays, carefully orchestrated to test boundaries and secure leverage. And it wasn't just actors or musicians who were targeted. Producers, executives, journalists, anyone with influence was invited, and those who refused to play along often found themselves on the outside, looking in. These weren't just isolated incidents. They were part of a system designed to control narratives and protect those at the top.
I'm talking about the club of gatekeepers that we all got to deal with.
The testimony also shed light on the role of psychological manipulation within this system. Ice Cube hinted at a practice of isolating individuals, cutting them off from their support systems, and feeding them a carefully curated version of reality. For many, the promises of fame and fortune quickly turned into a gilded cage. Cube's words echoed the experiences of others who had spoken out in recent years, describing a culture where fear and silence were currency. One former artist described how their career was derailed after they refused to attend one of Diddy's infamous events, while another recounted being blacklisted after attempting to go public with their story. And then there was the question of Jamie Foxx's health scare. Ice Cube's testimony suggested that what the public had been told might not be the whole truth. Foxx's sudden hospitalization in 2023, which had been shrouded in mystery, now seemed far more suspicious. Could it have been a coincidence, or was it a calculated warning? Cube's implications were clear. This was not just about one person's downfall, but a warning to anyone else who might consider stepping out of line. the thought was chilling, but it wasn't without precedent. Hollywood has long been a place where careers are made and unmade with the stroke of a pen, and now it seemed that same power extended into the personal lives of its stars.
Of coming forward, they've been afraid of what he could potentially do to them within the industry, what he could do to them professionally, maybe even personally. And so yes, it's been a dark secret they've held on to for a very, very long time.
But Jamie Foxx wasn't the only star whose sudden health issues or career derailments raised eyebrows. In recent years, several other high-profile figures have found themselves mysteriously sidelined after attempting to pull away from industry expectations. One such case involved a former R&B sensation who, after openly rejecting an offer to collaborate with Diddy's camp, was hospitalized under circumstances that remain unclear to this day. The singer had reportedly been working on a tell-all memoir that promised to expose the darker side of their climb to fame, but the project was abruptly shelved after their health took a sudden turn. Was this yet another calculated move to silence dissent, or just an eerie coincidence? These incidents, coupled with Cube's testimony, have forced many to revisit old rumors that were once dismissed as conspiracy theories. For example, whispers about a 1991 secret meeting involving top executives in the music industry have resurfaced. This meeting allegedly outlined a plan to use certain genres of music to influence behavior, aligning with Cube's claims about the ties between record labels and private prisons. While no hard evidence of this meeting exists, Cube's reference to social engineering and the carefully curated narratives pushed by labels lends credibility to what was once deemed unthinkable. If the same people profiting from music also benefit from incarceration, as Cube has suggested, then Hollywood's motives become far more sinister.
Literally the same people who own the labels own private prisons.
And then there's the question of how these systems sustain themselves. Cube's testimony hinted at a culture of mutual leverage where everyone at the top holds something over someone else. This is why the cycle remains so hard to break. Executives protect artists who comply, while those who rebel face character assassination, financial ruin, or worse. It's a system designed to perpetuate itself, with layers of plausible deniability ensuring that no one person bears full responsibility. This isn't just about the crimes of one man. It's about an industry built to shield those crimes from ever coming to light. The more we learn, the more it becomes clear that this isn't just a Diddy story. It's a Hollywood story, and it's one that's still unfolding. The courtroom was riveted as more connections were drawn. Ice Cube's testimony wasn't just a bombshell. It was a thread that, when pulled, began to unravel decades of secrecy. Prosecutors revealed communications between Diddy's team and several high-profile figures, suggesting a coordinated effort to suppress dissent. Was this the club that Cube had spoken of? A shadow organization pulling strings behind the scenes, ensuring that those who played by the rules were rewarded while those who didn't were punished. The evidence was circumstantial, but the patterns were undeniable.
He cornered me. And then he asked me, with his arm up, he asked me, "How you doing?" I'm kind of like, wow, this is what the heck? Very uncomfortable. And then he rubbed his hand down my breast. He said, "If you need anything at all, you let me know."
And it wasn't just Jamie Foxx who had been caught in the crosshairs. Cube's testimony pointed to a broader campaign of intimidation and control. He described how artists were pigeonholed, their creative visions stifled, and their public personas shaped to fit a mold dictated by the industry's power brokers. Those who resisted often found their reputations tarnished, their personal lives scrutinized, and their careers quietly derailed. One particularly chilling account came from a former protege of Diddy's who claimed they had been pressured to sign contracts under duress with the implied threat of career-ending consequences if they refused. The trial also raised questions about Diddy's vast business empire and how it was allegedly used to enforce this culture of control. From Bad Boy Records to Revolt TV, his influence extended far beyond music, touching nearly every corner of the entertainment world. Ice Cube's testimony suggested that these platforms weren't just vehicles for artistic expression, but tools for maintaining power. Employees and collaborators who stepped out of line were reportedly blacklisted, their opportunities drying up overnight. The message was clear. Loyalty was not optional, and those who defied the system paid the price.
I'm sorry, I'm just like really, I'm in this moment right now. This is crazy. Sorry. People don't really know how much what it does to you when something that you love is taken from you and thrown away like it don't even matter, and then they move on with their lives and you're stuck. You're stuck. During those years, you're still stuck 21 years later.
As the trial entered its second week, the public was left grappling with the implications of what had been revealed. This wasn't just about Sean Diddy Combs. It was about an industry that had allowed this behavior to thrive in the shadows. How many other powerful figures were complicit? How many careers had been destroyed to protect secrets? And how could an industry that claims to celebrate creativity and individuality operate in such a sinister way? These were questions that demanded answers, but for now, they remained shrouded in uncertainty. The revelations didn't stop with Ice Cube's testimony. Prosecutors hinted at further witnesses who could corroborate his claims, and rumors swirled about others who might come forward. Would Jamie Foxx himself take the stand? What about other artists who had distanced themselves from Diddy over the years? Each new piece of evidence painted a darker picture of an industry in crisis, one that had long prioritized profit and power over ethics and accountability.
I don't think Ice Cube knows who the puppeteers are. He understands that there are puppeteers, and he can tell from his own experience both.
As we reflect on what has been revealed so far, one thing is clear. This trial is about more than just one man's actions. It is a moment of reckoning for an entire industry. The stories of manipulation, coercion, and exploitation that have come to light are not just scandals. They are symptoms of a deeper rot that has festered for far too long. And while the trial of Sean Diddy Combs may be the catalyst, the ripple effects are already being felt far beyond the courtroom. What happens next is anyone's guess. Will more victims come forward? Will the industry finally be forced to confront its darkest secrets? Or will the system find a way to protect itself, ensuring that the truth remains buried? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the world is watching, and this story is far from over. What do you think? Is this the beginning of real change, or just another chapter in Hollywood's long history of scandal and cover-up? Let us know in the comments below. We're just getting started.